Welcome to Midweek Devotion. Thank you for joining us today. I quite regularly, as I'm sure you might as well, come across circumstances in which you know you are facing something which appears and almost certainly will not be able to change. And when I'm confronted with things that I cannot change, I'm often aware of a deep sense of powerlessness, of impotence. And that powerlessness often turns to frustration, and sometimes that frustration even turns to anger if I go, I cannot make this thing different. We are back in the Old Testament again for this midweek devotion, and we have another intriguing story, and we're reading from Numbers 16 today. And we're only reading a small portion of it. You might want to go read the whole chapter. It's quite in its own way, unsettling chapter. And I'd ask you not to get embroiled in the unsettling part of it. Try and look past some of those things, because it actually is a profound story. I found it rich in meaning, and maybe you could find that too. I need to give you a little bit of background in case you aren't up to speed with these things, but to remind you that the Israelites are in the wilderness. Moses has led them out of captivity in Egypt, and now they are wandering around the wilderness. And the wilderness is a strange place for them. It's ironic because many of the people are saying, we wished we were back in slavery. We wish we were back in Egypt because then we knew how life worked. Wilderness life is characterized by unpredictability and uncertainty and not knowing what's going to come. And that made me think quite a lot about the circumstances in which we're living. But whilst they're wandering around in the wilderness, the people become unhappy, as many of us have been unhappy during lockdown. Last week we heard about their unhappiness over their food, and this week we learn about their unhappiness, I suppose you could call it, about their government. The scriptures tell us that there were 600,000 men as a part of this group of people, and so if you just do your maths, assuming there are probably an equal number of women and some children, I think it would be safe to think that there are probably about 1.5 million people wandering around the wilderness, and that's the size of a small contemporary city. So it's a large group of people. And that large group of people need good leadership. And the leadership for Israel in those days was just these two key men, Moses, the one who'd led them out of their captivity, and his brother Aaron. And they had similar but also different roles. Moses really took the role of, I suppose, if you wanted to use contemporary political language, he was a bit like the president, he was in charge. But next to him was his brother Aaron, the priest. And the priest was an important role because in Israel's wilderness journey, there were really two things I think that they were chiefly doing. The one was just surviving, and they needed a good leader to help them survive. And then they spent quite a lot of time worshiping. Worship was an integral part of their life there. So the role of the priest was important too. Moses also had a key priestly role, but there was this distinction of the sense of Moses leader and Aaron as priest. And in our reading today, it's the story of a guy called Korah, who leads a group of 250 men who were part of the Levite tribe, part of the Levite clan. And the Levites were the worship leaders, and this group of 250, they're called members of a council, and there is some dispute about the nature of that council exactly. But from our reading today, we know if this wasn't their only task, it was certainly a key part of their task, is that this 250 men under the leadership of Korah, their job was to assist with the worship of Israel. So now remember, there are 1.5 million people, and out of that 1.5 million, 250 get selected to do the sacred work of preparing worship, which included things like setting up the tent when they'd arrived in a new place, putting out the tables and the cloths and the candlesticks, and setting up the altar and all the other ornamental things that were needed for worship, and getting it all ready and right for worship. People doing holy things, important work. And then when they had to move on, they'd break it all down and store it and pack it carefully so it could be set up again later. And these guys come along and they wanting to challenge the leadership of Moses and Aaron. They're feeling like they've been playing second fiddle to these key leaders. The key leaders, the Moses and Aaron, they actually get to hold the sacred stuff in worship. They get to lead the people in worship. But these guys are tired of being the background boys, as it were. They want more prominence. They want more significance in their life. And so they come and they challenge Moses on a few things. It's very interesting. They say to Moses, all the people here are holy. What makes you think that you are more holy than the rest of us? And he goes on and says, and the Lord is with all of us. What makes you think the Lord is with you more importantly or more significantly than he is with us? And then he asks what really turns out to be the key question. He really gets to the point and he says, in essence, and these are my words, he says, and who put you in charge of us? And of course the answer to that question is God. But Korah has come and he's hit himself against a difficult wall here. He's trying to change, which in this moment, a thing that cannot be changed. This is how it is. And in his efforts to try and change what cannot be changed, he bumps his head against a significant wall with some fairly significant consequences. And when I read that story, and I thought about Korah's frustration and his hitting his head against the wall, it really just reminded me almost instantaneously of this beautiful prayer that many of you will know. It is dearly loved within the Alcoholics Anonymous movement, and its history is a little uncertain, but it's been around for a good while. And it's this prayer, and I think it's a suitable prayer for our days today. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Now, the problem for Korah in our story today was that he lacked the wisdom to know the difference between the things that he could change and the things that in that moment were unchangeable. He was fighting against a set of circumstances which, even though it looked like they could be changed, in fact couldn't. And as he attempted to do so, as we said, he did a little more than knock his head against the wall. He ended up with some fairly significant consequences. And that had me thinking about our coronavirus and the lockdown and the struggles that we all are having at the moment. We all are confronted with, I suppose, these two things that beautiful prayer describes. We all are confronted with things that are hard and that cannot change right now, and even some of the things that look like they might be able to change but in fact can't. And we're confronted with things that we probably can change and ought to change in this moment. Earlier this week, during the exercise time that we were allowed, I made my cycle route to go past where my grandson lives, and I arranged with his parents to have him stand on their side of the gate so I could wave to him from the pavement. I haven't seen him since the night before lockdown in the flesh, and it was wonderful to be there. It was wonderful to see him again, but it was also very painful in its own way because I couldn't hug him, I couldn't hold him, it just reminded me again of just what all of this is doing. And I was thinking how hard life is and how difficult it is, in a sense, to accept things the way they are. And so my prayer for all of us on this day is to ask us to do these two things. The one is, let's ask the Lord for the courage to change the things we can. There is absolutely no doubt that we have to adapt. From the smallest things like how we go shopping, to how we relate to people we love and care about, to how we maintain contact with us. When I think of church life, how do we continue to have a sense that we are not just doing all of this on our own, on our TVs and phones, and how do we have a sense of being community, of being together? How do we adapt? How do we have the courage to change? But I think the heavier word for me today, for us, is to then also ask the question, and how can we accept those things which we actually cannot change? Because there are some things with which we really have to live. There are some things with which we will need to be patient. There are some things which in due course will pass away, but for now they are as they are. And I think about Korah, and I think about him bashing his head against the wall. And my prayer for all of us is that God will grant us the wisdom to know the difference between those things which need to change and those things which require acceptance. For me, acceptance, I've come to learn, and continue to learn, by the way, but I've come to learn, acceptance is a thing that I don't think we can just choose. Certainly I can't. I don't think we just psychologically go, I'm going to choose to accept this. For me, it's become really a deep matter of saying, Lord, will you help me to accept it? It's a grace, it's a gift that God can give us in these moments. I think we need to invite acceptance into our lives. The Apostle Paul would describe this acceptance, I think, as the peace which passes all understanding. And so I invite you in this time, be courageous, be changing that which can change, but also may God give you the gift of acceptance to welcome into your life the peace of God for those moments where you know this is how things have to be and I must come to accept it. Will you join me once more in this beautiful prayer? God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Thank you for joining us. God bless you today, and God go with you.